I know this is going to sound unbelievable, but I swear every word of it is true. I don't know who else to tell, but I must get this out there in hopes that someone else has experienced the same thing. It started about a month ago when I was camping with some friends deep in the woods behind my house. We had gone camping there dozens of times before since we were kids. We knew the area really well, or so we thought. We hiked for a few hours to get to this secluded clearing we liked to camp at. It was surrounded by thick trees and brush. That night we built a fire, drank some beers, and told stupid ghost stories. Normal stuff. Everything seemed fine until about 2 a.m. I woke up to use the trees as a bathroom. I grabbed my flashlight and headed just far enough into the woods for some privacy. But as I was finishing up, I heard something rustling in the bushes nearby. I quickly shone my flashlight beam around, trying to see what it was. "Hello?" I called out nervously. The thing in the bushes sounded big, not like a squirrel or raccoon. My mind jumped to a bear or mountain lion, but what I saw emerge sent shivers down my spine. It was a freakishly tall, skinny humanoid creature. It had to be at least 7 feet tall, hunched over with long, dangling arms. Its skin was pale and hairless, stretched tightly over an emaciated frame. Yet what sent a shiver down the spine was its face, a hideous mask of horror. Its eyes were like twin pools of endless darkness, devoid of any pupils, and its gaping, lipless mouth stretched grotesquely from ear to ear, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth. This nightmarish visage seemed like a macabre parody of a human face, a twisted mockery of the familiar. For weeks after, everything seemed normal, but I couldn't get that creature's shriek out of my head. I had constant nightmares where I was back in the woods, being chased and cornered by the monster, its bony arms reaching for me. One night the nightmare was so vivid that I jerked awake, my heart pounding. That's when I noticed a faint scratching sound at my bedroom window. Blood running cold, I slowly walked over and pulled back the curtain. There, peering in with its hideous mask of horror, was the creature from the woods. Adrenaline flooded my system and I let out a panicked yell. The thing shrieked back, then scuttled off into the night. I tried to tell myself it was just another nightmare brought on by trauma. But the next night I heard that scratching sound again. When I peeked out the window, those freakish black eyes stared back at me from the darkness. No one believed me, not even my closest friends. I started questioning my own sanity. Was this thing real or some psychotic delusion? My nights became plagued by visits from the creature, appearing at my window, shrieking from outside my door. Things escalated when I came home one night to find my back door wide open. My house had been ransacked, furniture overturned, belongings strewn everywhere. In my bedroom, claw-like scratch marks covered the walls and windows. I knew without a doubt it had been inside my house while I was out. This was no longer just happening in my dreams. I was being targeted by this monster. I decided my only choice was to move far away, somewhere secluded. I packed only the essentials and left that very night, driving for hours until I came across a small cabin deep in the mountains. It wasn't much, just one room and a bed, but I hoped being isolated would keep me safe. The first few nights there were peaceful, no signs or sounds of the creature. But on the third night I was jolted awake by an all too familiar shriek piercing the silence. My blood turned to ice. It was here. It had followed me. I leaped out of bed just as the front door burst open, and that towering pale figure lurched inside. I was cornered as it staggered toward me, releasing an ungodly wail. Backpedaling in terror, I lost my footing and crashed to the floor. The monster loomed over me, so close I could smell its putrid stench. I squeezed my eyes shut and braced for the end, but suddenly it let out a horrified screech and I heard it stumble away. Daring to open my eyes, I saw it writhing in agony in the corner. The creature burst into my cabin, its claws outstretched to attack me. In its frenzy, it knocked over the lit candles on my bedside table. The candles rolled onto the thin curtains hanging in the window, immediately igniting the dry fabric. Within seconds, the flames spread to the aged wooden walls of the cabin. The fire quickly engulfed the entire room. Trapped inside the burning cabin, the creature let out piercing shrieks as the flames consumed its skinny limbs. I shielded my face from the intense heat and scrambled outside to safety. Within minutes, the entire cabin was a raging inferno. The creature continued to scream in agony from somewhere deep within the collapsed, burning ruins. I watched the place burn to the ground, taking my tormentor with it. By the time the fire department arrived, nothing remained but smoldering ashes drifting into the night sky. It's been weeks now since that horrific encounter. The police ruled the fire as accidental and left it at that. Everyone seems to think this nightmare is finally over for me. But they're wrong. It's only just begun. Because I know the truth. That thing isn't gone forever. It escaped the fire. And one way or another, someday soon it'll be back for me. I have been strangely compelled to return to my childhood home. For years, I've avoided going back to that old neighborhood, preferring to leave the past buried. But over the last few weeks, an inexplicable urge has washed over me, almost like a voice whispering in my mind. Go back. Go home. At first, I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to nostalgia or morbid curiosity, but the feeling only grew stronger with each passing day, until I could no longer resist. I took a week off work, got in my car, and started driving. The trip back was surreal. I hadn't been on these roads in over a decade, yet muscle memory kicked in, my hands effortlessly guiding the wheel. Landmarks sparked vivid memories as I passed. The old gas station, the park I used to play in, the street where I fell off my bike and skinned my knee. It all came flooding back in a kaleidoscope of senses and emotions. I pulled up to the house slowly, my heart pounding. It looked exactly as I remembered it. The same grassy yard, the same tall oak tree, the same red brick facade. For a moment I was 10 years old again, walking up to the front door after school, fishing the spare key out from under a flower pot. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked up the front steps. I half expected to see my mother through the window, waving happily that I was home. But the house was still and quiet. I tried the doorknob. Locked, of course. I peered through the front windows, but the interior was dark. Slowly, I made my way around the side of the house and into the backyard. The old tire swing still hung from the oak tree, swaying gently in the breeze. The garden shed where I used to play fort still stood in the corner, the door slightly ajar. I smiled faintly at the "No Girls Allowed" sign I had tacked to it as a kid. As I looked around the yard, drinking it all in, the wind picked up. The back door suddenly swung open with a loud creak. I froze. Cautiously, I approached the open door. The house was silent. I stepped inside. It was like traveling back in time. The kitchen table, the faded wallpaper, the smell of coffee and cinnamon. It was all exactly as I remembered. I wandered through the house in wonder, running my hands over the dusty furniture. In the living room, I paused by the fireplace, looking up at the photos on the mantel. My parents smiled down from behind the glass, frozen in happier times. I shook my head in disbelief. Why was it so perfectly preserved? It was as if time had stood still the moment we left. I made my way down the hall towards my old bedroom. The door was closed. With bated breath, I turned the handle and opened it. My room looked untouched. The same bed, desk, and posters on the wall. I sat down on the twin bed, causing a plume of dust to billow up. As I gazed around trying to process this bizarre homecoming, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. There, on my nightstand, sat a framed photo of me and my parents at the county fair. I remembered that day well. The petting zoo, the Ferris wheel, the ice cream cones. We took that photo right before getting on the carousel, but there was something wrong with the photo. Although it was clearly my parents and me, the image was distorted. Our faces appeared warped, our smiles twisted and grotesque. A dark aura emanated from the photo. I jumped up, heart racing. This was all wrong. I had to get out of there. I ran from the room and down the hall, aiming for the back door. As I reached for the handle, a booming voice echoed through the house. "Welcome home." I screamed and turned around. There was no one there. Suddenly, the walls began to drip a dark red liquid. The coppery smell of blood filled the air as it pooled on the floor. Shadows danced across the ceiling, growing larger and darker. The voice laughed, low and sinister. I yanked at the door frantically, but it was jammed shut. Sobbing, I pounded my fists against it. Let me out, please! The house began to shake violently. The floorboards splintered beneath my feet. I collapsed as the ground gave way, plunging me into darkness. I awoke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. I was in my bedroom, sunlight streaming through the window. It was just a nightmare. Letting out a shaky breath, I sat up and froze. There, on my nightstand, was a photo of me as a child at the county fair, my family's faces warped and distorted. I recoiled in horror, bile rising in my throat. What was happening? Had I somehow brought this home from that house? Or had that thing followed me? I knew then I should never have returned to my childhood home. Something evil remained there, lingering like a shadow I could not escape. And now, I feared that darkness had found its way back to me. I guess I should start from the beginning. My name's Mike, and up until a few days ago, I was just a normal college kid. I lived in a small house near campus with two of my buddies, Matt and Chris. We were all film majors and horror movie buffs, so we'd have scary movie marathons all the time. Last weekend, we decided to go to this old abandoned house on the edge of town that was rumored to be haunted. We figured it'd be fun to explore and maybe even film some stuff there for one of our class projects. The house was huge, like some old Victorian mansion, but it had been empty for decades. When we first walked inside, it was exactly what you'd expect from an abandoned house. Dust and cobwebs everywhere, peeling wallpaper, broken furniture scattered around. It smelled like mold and mildew. We joked around about finding some ghosts or dead bodies hidden away somewhere. As we wandered through the rooms, things started to get creepy. We heard strange noises, bangs and scratching sounds that seemed to follow us no matter where we went. At one point, I thought I saw a dark figure duck into one of the bedrooms, but when I flashed my camera over there, it was empty. We ended up in this room upstairs that looked like it had belonged to a little girl at some point. There were faded pink walls with a floral wallpaper border, and in the corner, there was an old porcelain doll propped up in a small rocking chair. I don't know why, but that doll really gave me the chills. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. The way its head tilted to the side, the little curled smile on its lips. It just seemed unnatural. Matt dared me to touch it, but I just wanted to get out of there and move on to another room. That's when things got really messed up. Right as we turned to leave, the doll's head jerked and snapped towards us, its eyes rolling wildly in their sockets. We all screamed, blood-curdling, horror movie-style screams. We bolted from the room and ran down the stairs, not even looking back. We kept running until we were outside and halfway down the block. Once we calmed down, we tried to laugh it off as some weird trick of the light or our imaginations getting carried away in the creepy house. But I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling, like we had awoken something evil in that house and it had its sights set on us now. Over the next few days, more unexplainable things kept happening. Matt said he woke up one night and saw the doll standing over him at the foot of his bed, its head twitching from side to side. He swore he was wide awake, but when he blinked, it was gone. We all had nightmares about that doll and the abandoned house. In mine, I was running through the halls as a shadowy figure pursued me, always remaining just out of sight, no matter how fast I ran. I tried to scream, but no sound would come out. Chris started acting paranoid, insisting he saw the doll peering out at him from dark corners around our house. He even claimed he woke up one night and saw it on his nightstand, reaching a porcelain hand out for his neck. We figured it was just lack of sleep making him see things, but things reached a breaking point the following weekend when I was home alone. I had fallen asleep on the couch watching TV when a loud thump jolted me awake. I sat up quickly, my heart racing. Had that come from inside the house? I scanned the dark living room, but nothing seemed amiss. I shook my head, ready to write it off as the house settling or something. But then I heard it again. Thump, 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 like heavy footsteps approaching from the hallway. I froze, listening intently. The footsteps got louder and closer, the floorboards creaking under some unseen weight. I reached frantically for the remote to turn on a light, but just as I clicked the button, a horribly familiar porcelain face lunged from the darkness right in front of me. I screamed and tumbled backward off the couch, The doll let out an awful scraping wail and scuttled towards me like some twisted crab, its limbs clacking together unnaturally. It kept coming, closer and closer as I scrambled back on my hands, unable to tear my eyes away from its twitching head and snapping jaws. Just as it reached for me with outstretched porcelain hands, I managed to grab a heavy book from the coffee table and swing it at the doll with all my might. It went flying across the room and smashed into the wall, breaking into pieces with an ear-splitting shriek. I sat there shaking, hyperventilating. After what felt like forever, I finally crept over to inspect the doll's remains. It was shattered beyond repair, just a pile of painted porcelain fragments scattered on the floor. I swept the pieces into a garbage bag and took them outside to the dumpster. The next day, Matt and Chris didn't believe me when I told them what happened. They thought I had just fallen asleep and had a freakishly vivid nightmare. But I knew what I had seen, what I had destroyed. Something evil had been set loose in that abandoned house, and it had followed us home. I thought it was finally over after that night, that the doll's destruction had ended its twisted pursuit of me and my friends, but I should have known better. There was no sign of the doll over the next week, no creepy sightings, no unexplained noises. I started to hope that my friends were right. It had all just been in my head. I tried to focus on school, work on my assignments, and forget all about that night. Until today, that is. I was leaving class and heading down the deserted stairwell of the arts building. It was late in the day and the campus was mostly empty. I adjusted the strap of my backpack and glanced down at my phone to check an email. Without warning, someone or something violently shoved me from behind. I screamed as I lost my footing and tumbled forward down the stairs. There was a sickening crack as my ankle twisted under me and I crashed to the landing below. White-hot pain shot through my leg. I groaned through gritted teeth, fighting back tears as I looked up to see who had pushed me. There was no one there. But just as I started to pull myself up, I heard a faint scraping sound drifting down from the top of the stairs. A chill ran down my spine. Unsteady, I used the railing to stand up on one foot, avoiding putting weight on my injured ankle. I looked fearfully up into the shadowy stairwell, dreading what I might see there. For a moment there was silence. Then, the soft sound of something being dragged down each step, one by one by one. Scrap, 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 coming agonizingly closer. It was only when the dragging reached the landing below that the figure came into view. I couldn't even scream, just choked out a strangled gasp at the nightmarish sight. It was the doll, its shattered porcelain body messily pieced back together with some kind of dark, tar-like substance oozing from the cracks and crevices. Its jerky, uncoordinated movements almost resembled a marionette controlled by invisible strings. As it scuttled toward me, I overcame my shock and terror enough to half run, half hobble to the exit. I could hear the scraping quicken behind me as the doll gave chase. My ankle burned and threatened to give out completely, but I pushed through the pain in a frenzied need to escape. I limped out into the empty quad, the sun just beginning to set over the campus. I made it halfway across the grassy space before inevitably stumbling as my ankle finally buckled. I crumpled to the ground with a cry, unable to go any further. Twisting around, I looked back in dread at the art building doorway I had just stumbled out of. For a moment there was nothing. Maybe I had outrun the creature after all. But then I saw it, the doll's mismatched form crawling out of the building, picking up speed as it scuttled erratically towards me. I scrambled backward on the grass, but there was nowhere left to go. The doll approached relentlessly, its mouth yawning wider and wider, until an unearthly shriek poured out from someplace deep within its porcelain frame. The sound grew deafening as it loomed over me, so loud I felt it vibrating through my bones. This is it, I thought. This is the end. I'm going to die here at this thing's cold porcelain hands. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the final blow. Suddenly, I felt myself being shaken violently. My eyes snapped open with a gasp. I was back in my bed, drenched in a cold sweat. Matt stood over me, looking concerned. "Dude, you were screaming in your sleep," he said. "Are you okay?" I sat up, my heart still racing as I tried to slow my panicked breathing. Looking around, I confirmed I was in my bedroom. No abandoned house, no stairwell, no possessed doll on the attack. It had seemed so real. but it must have been just another nightmare. I raked my hands through my damp hair. Yeah, sorry, man. Just another bad dream, I muttered. Matt nodded sympathetically. About that creepy doll again? I managed a weak laugh, though my pulse was still pounding. Yeah, guess I'm not over that yet. Can't blame you, after what happened, Matt said with a frown. Anyway, I'm gonna grab some coffee. Want some? Sure, thanks, I replied hoarsely. Matt headed out to the kitchen while I unsteadily got out of bed to start getting ready for class. I hobbled over to my desk, leaning down to grab my backpack off the floor. As I slung it over my shoulder, my foot bumped against something under the desk. I leaned down, squinting in the dim morning light to see what it was. There, lying on the floor, was a shattered porcelain arm, its curled porcelain fingers stained with something dark. I stood frozen, staring at the disembodied arm as my mind raced. That hadn't been a nightmare. It was real. Which could only mean one thing. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just the beginning.